The rain came down in sheets against the windows of Whitmore Manor, each drop a whisper of the rumours that had followed Miss Rosalind Whitmore for 3 long years. The villagers called her mad. The servants crossed themselves when she passed. Even her own father had locked her away in the East Wing, hidden from society like a shameful secret. But Rosalind was not mad. She was simply different. Since childhood, she had seen things others could not, heard voices in empty rooms, felt the weight of sorrow that clung to certain places like morning fog. Her mother had understood once, had called it a gift, but when fever took her mother at age 12, Rosalind's visions had become her curse. Now, at 25, she stood at the rain-streaked window of her prison, watching the dark road beyond the gates. No visitors came to Whitmore Manor anymore. No suitors braved the whispers to seek her hand. She was forgotten by the world, save for the stories told in taverns about the madwoman who wandered the halls at night, speaking to ghosts. But tonight was different. Tonight, something was coming. She could feel it in the air, thick with warning and possibility. Her fingers pressed against the cold glass as lightning split the sky. On the road below, a figure stumbled through the storm. A man, his clothes torn and muddy, his movements unsteady. He collapsed just beyond the manor gates. Rosalind's heart quickened. Without thinking, she grabbed her cloak and rushed from her chambers. The servants had long since retired, and her father was away in London on business. No one would stop her. No one would see. She flew down the servants' stairs and out the kitchen door, her slippers instantly soaked through as she ran toward the gates. The man lay face down in the mud, rain pouring over him. When she reached him and turned him over, lightning illuminated his face. Young, perhaps 30. Strong features marked by exhaustion and pain. A scar cut across his left cheek, still fresh and angry. "Help me," he gasped, his eyes unfocused. "Please, they are hunting me." Rosalind looked toward the dark road, seeing no pursuers yet. But she believed him. Something in his voice rang true, desperate and haunted, with strength she did not know she possessed. She dragged him through the gates and across the lawn toward the old groundskeeper's cottage, long abandoned and hidden by overgrown ivy. Inside, she lit a candle with trembling hands. The man had lost consciousness. His coat bore the marks of military service, buttons torn away but the quality unmistakable. She pulled aside his shirt to check for wounds and found his chest marked with scars, some old, some terribly new. "War," she whispered, understanding flooding through her. This man had been to war. The conflict on the continent that had raged for 2 years, the one that had sent so many young men away and brought back so few. She worked through the night, cleaning his wounds, with water from the well, wrapping them with strips torn from her petticoat. His fever burned hot, and he muttered in his delirium. Names she did not recognize, battles she had only read about in the papers, and one word that came again and again: betrayed. For 3 days, Rosalind nursed him in secret. She smuggled food from the kitchen, carried water from the well, and sat beside him as his fever raged. The servants noticed nothing. They never looked for her, never thought to check on the madwoman in the East Wing. On the 4th day his fever broke. His eyes opened, clear and grey as winter sky. He stared at her for a long moment, taking in her simple dress, her tangled hair, her face marked by exhaustion. "You saved me," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "Why?" "Because you needed help," Rosalind replied simply. "Who are you?" He hesitated, weariness crossing his features. "No one of importance." "That is not true," she said softly. "I can feel it. You are someone being hunted." His eyes narrowed. "You are the one they speak of, the Madwoman of Whitmore Manor. The words stung, though she showed nothing. I am Rosalind Whitmore, and I am not mad, no matter what they say. Something shifted in his expression. Not pity, but understanding. No, he agreed quietly. I do not think you are. Over the following days, he grew stronger. Rosalind learned his story in fragments, pieces he offered carefully, as if testing whether she could be trusted. His name was Thomas. He had been a soldier, a captain in His Majesty's forces, but something had happened in the war, something that turned his commanding officer against him. I witnessed a crime, he told her one evening as twilight painted the cottage walls purple and gold. A general, a man of high standing, ordering the slaughter of civilians, women and children. When I tried to stop it, when I threatened to report what I had seen, he declared me a deserter. Now I am hunted as a traitor, while the true criminal sits in London, decorated and celebrated. Rosalind's hands stilled on the bandage she was changing. You cannot prove what you saw. The other witnesses are dead, Thomas said bitterly, killed in battles that seemed too convenient. I am the last one left who knows the truth, and if they find me, I will die too. Not as a hero, but as a criminal. Then we must keep you hidden, Rosalind declared, until we can find a way to prove your innocence. Thomas studied her face. Why do you believe me? You have no reason to trust a stranger who appeared at your gates. She met his gaze steadily. Because I know what it is to be called mad when you speak an uncomfortable truth. Because I have learned to see what others cannot. And I see no deception in you, only pain. Something passed between them in that moment. Understanding, perhaps, or the first stirring of something deeper. The weeks that followed took on a strange rhythm. By day, Rosalind maintained her routine in the manor, letting the servants believe she remained locked in her chambers. By night, she slipped away to the cottage, bringing food, clean clothes, and news from the outside world. Thomas grew stronger. His wounds healed, leaving fresh scars to join the old ones, but his nightmares persisted. She would wake to find him trembling, sweat-soaked and calling out warnings to men long dead. On those nights, she would sit beside him and speak softly until the terrors passed. Tell me about your life before, he asked her one evening. Before they called you mad. Rosalind was silent for a moment, surprised by the question. No one had asked about her past in years. I was ordinary, she said at last. Perhaps too quiet, too serious, but not strange. My mother understood me. She had the gift too, the ability to sense things beyond what eyes can see. She taught me to trust it, to see it as a blessing rather than a curse. What changed? She died, and my father, in his grief, could not accept that I spoke of feeling her presence still. He called it madness. The doctors agreed. They said my visions were symptoms of hysteria. They recommended confinement for my own protection. Her voice grew bitter, and so I became the Madwoman, locked away where I could embarrass no one. Thomas reached for her hand, the gesture gentle. You are the sanest person I have met, braver too. You risk everything to help a fugitive. Perhaps I am mad after all, Rosalind said with a slight smile. But if this is madness, I prefer it to their sanity. It was on a Wednesday morning that everything changed. Rosalind had just returned to the manor from the cottage when she heard voices in the entrance hall. Her father had returned from London unexpectedly, and he was not alone. She pressed herself against the wall at the top of the stairs, listening. I assure you, Lord Ashford, there is no one here who matches that description. Rosalind's blood ran cold. Lord Ashford. She knew that name. Thomas had spoken it with hatred. Lord Ashford was the general who had ordered the massacre. the man who now hunted Thomas as a deserter. Nevertheless, I must insist on searching the property, came a smooth, cultured voice. We have reports that Captain Thomas Harding was seen in this area. He is a dangerous criminal, wanted for desertion and theft of military property. You are welcome to search, of course, her father replied. Though I warn you, my daughter resides here, and she is not well. If you disturb her, she may become agitated. I shall be the soul of discretion, Lord Ashford promised. Rosalind's mind raced. They would search the manor first, then the grounds. They would find the cottage, find Thomas. She had perhaps an hour, maybe less. She fled down the servants' stairs and out across the lawn, her heart pounding. Thomas was awake when she burst into the cottage, reading a book she had brought him. He stood immediately at the look on her face. They are here, she gasped. Searching for you, you must go. Now. Where? Thomas asked, already gathering his few possessions. I am still too weak to travel far, and they will search the roads. Rosalind's mind worked frantically. Then an idea struck her, desperate but possible. The family crypt beneath the chapel. No one goes there. The villagers say it is haunted. Is it? Perhaps, she admitted. But the dead will not betray you. They ran together through the gardens, staying low behind hedges and stone walls. The old chapel stood at the far edge of the property, its walls covered in ivy, its door warped with age. Rosalind produced a heavy key from her pocket and unlocked the entrance. Inside, the air was cool and heavy with the scent of stone and thyme. She led Thomas down crumbling stairs to the crypt below, where generations of Wetmores rested in marble peace. She had played here as a child before the rumors of hauntings drove others away. There, she pointed to a large tomb in the corner. Behind that, there is a space just wide enough. Thomas squeezed into the narrow gap between tomb and wall, his tall frame barely fitting. Rosalind draped him with an old cloth to hide his form. Then she hesitated, reluctant to leave him in this cold darkness. Go, he urged softly, before they notice your absence. I will return as soon as I can, she promised, with food and news. His hand caught hers for just a moment. Rosalind, thank you for everything. She wanted to say more, wanted to tell him what these weeks had meant to her, how his presence had awakened something she thought long dead. But there was no time. She could hear voices calling in the distance. Stay hidden, she whispered. No matter what you hear. She fled back to the manor, arriving breathless in her chambers, just as a servant knocked at her door. Miss Rosalind, your father wishes to see you in the drawing room. Rosalind composed herself, smoothing her dress and hair. She descended the stairs slowly, playing the part she had perfected over 3 years. The distracted, vague woman that everyone expected. Her father stood in the drawing room with 3 men. One was Lord Ashford, tall and distinguished with silver at his temples and cold blue eyes. The other 2 wore military uniforms. Rosalind, her father said carefully, as one speaks to a frightened animal. These gentlemen are searching for a deserter. Have you seen any strangers on the property? She let her gaze drift past them, unfocused. Strangers? She murmured. I see many strangers, Papa. They come and go. Some are here, some are not. Time is such a curious thing, don't you find? Lord Ashford's expression tightened with distaste. Your daughter is as you described. I told you, her father said, embarrassment coloring his voice. She has not been well since her mother passed. She rarely leaves her chambers. Nevertheless, Lord Ashford said, turning his calculating gaze on Rosalind, perhaps she has seen something without realizing its significance. Captain Harding is approximately 30 years of age, tall, with dark hair and a fresh scar on his face. Have you encountered anyone matching that description? Rosalind tilted her head, as if listening to something only she could hear. A man with a scarred face? Yes, I have seen him. He comes to me at night, covered in blood. He says his name is Henry, or perhaps Harold. The dead are sometimes unclear about such details. The officers exchanged glances. Her father closed his eyes, humiliated, but Lord Ashford stepped closer, studying her with unnerving intensity. You jest with us, Miss Whitmore. I never jest, Rosalind replied, meeting his eyes with deliberate vagueness. Jesting requires a certain cleverness of mind that I am told I lack. Papa says I see things that are not there, but how can I be certain what is there and what is not? Can you? Lord Ashford's jaw tightened. He turned to her father. She is useless. We waste time here. He gestured to his men. Search the grounds, every building, every shadow. I want that traitor found. For 2 days, soldiers combed the property. They searched the cottage, finding signs of recent habitation. They questioned servants. They walked every path and examined every structure, but they did not search the family crypt. Fear of ghosts proved more powerful than military orders. Rosalind maintained her act, drifting through the manor like a spectre herself, speaking in riddles and seeing what was not there. Lord Ashford watched her with suspicion, but could find no crack in her performance. On the 3rd day, he called off the search. The traitor has moved on, he announced, but I will have men watching the roads. If Captain Harding appears in this county, we will know. When they finally departed, Rosalind waited until nightfall before returning to the crypt. She found Thomas exactly where she had left him, cramped and cold but unharmed. They are gone, she told him, helping him from his hiding place. But they watch the roads now. You cannot leave. Thomas stretched his stiff muscles, wincing. I cannot stay here forever. Eventually, I will be found. And when I am, they will hang me without trial. Then we must prove your innocence, Rosalind said firmly. There must be evidence. Papers, orders, something that shows what Lord Ashford did. If such evidence exists, it will be in military records in London, Thomas said, guarded and inaccessible. Then we must find another way, Rosalind insisted. You did not survive war only to die for another man's crimes. Over the following weeks, they worked together, planning and scheming. Thomas wrote down everything he remembered from that terrible day. Names of villages, dates, details that could be verified. Rosalind, in turn, began writing letters, carefully worded, anonymous letters to members of Parliament, to military officials she had read about in newspapers, to anyone who might listen. Most went unanswered, but one did not. A young member of Parliament named Sir Richard Devons wrote back, asking for more information. He had heard whispers, he said, of irregularities in Lord Ashford's command. If proof could be provided, he would raise the matter in Parliament. Hope kindled, but gathering proof meant risk. It meant Thomas venturing out at night to meet with Sir Richard's trusted men. It meant Rosalind providing cover, creating distractions, maintaining her performance as the Madwoman while scheming with clarity of mind. And, through it all, something grew between them. In the quiet hours of evening, when Thomas returned safely from his secret meetings, in the moments when their hands touched as she changed his bandages, though the wounds had long since healed, in the way he looked at her, not with pity or fear, but with something far deeper. You are extraordinary, he told her one night, brave and brilliant, the opposite of everything they call you. I am only doing what is right, Rosalind protested. No, Thomas said softly. You are doing what others lack the courage to attempt. You risk everything for a man you had no reason to trust. That is not ordinary. That is remarkable. She felt heat rise to her cheeks. Perhaps I am selfish. Perhaps I help you because, for the first time in years, I feel useful, real. Then we save each other, Thomas said, taking her hand. Because you make me remember what I am fighting for. Not just my life or my honor, but the belief that truth matters, that justice matters. Their fingers intertwined, and Rosalind felt her heart beat faster. How strange, she thought, that in the midst of danger and deception, she should find something that felt like happiness. It was on a cold morning in March that word came. Sir Richard had gathered enough evidence, testimonies from other soldiers, records that had been hidden, proof of Lord Ashford's orders. He was bringing the matter before a special military tribunal, and he needed Thomas to testify. "It is a trap," Thomas said immediately when Rosalind brought him the message. "Lord Ashford will have me killed before I reach London." "Sir Richard promises protection," Rosalind argued. "An escort of his own trusted men. If you do not testify, all this work is for nothing." Thomas paced the cottage, torn. "I will not risk your safety. If I am discovered, they will know someone helped me. They will trace it back to you. They will not believe the madwoman capable of such schemes," Rosalind said. "It is my greatest protection, this act I have played so long." In the end, Thomas agreed. The risk was too great not to take. Sir Richard's men came at night, silent and professional. They spirited Thomas away to London, leaving Rosalind alone at Whitmore Manor once more. The days that followed were agony. She had no word of what was happening in London. No way to know if Thomas had arrived safely, if he had testified, if he still lived. She maintained her routines, drifting through the manor, speaking her nonsense, hiding her terror behind vacant eyes. Then, one morning, her father called her to his study. His expression was strange, caught between confusion and something else, fear perhaps. "Rosalind," he said carefully, "there are men here to see you, from London." Her heart stopped. Had Thomas been caught? Would they arrest her as an accomplice? But the men who entered were not soldiers. One was Sir Richard Devons, his young face earnest and kind. The other was Thomas, clean-shaven, dressed in a fine coat, looking nothing like the desperate fugitive who had collapsed at their gates. "Miss Whitmore," Sir Richard said, bowing formally, "I have come to thank you." Rosalind's father looked between them, utterly lost. "I do not understand." "Your daughter, sir, has helped expose one of the greatest military injustices of our time," Sir Richard explained. "Captain Thomas Harding was falsely accused of desertion when in fact he attempted to stop a war crime. Thanks to Miss Whitmore's courage, the truth has been revealed." Thomas stepped forward, his grey eyes finding hers. "Lord Ashford has been arrested," he said quietly. "He faces court-martial for ordering the massacre of civilians. Several of his officers have confessed to receiving orders to silence witnesses. I have been cleared of all charges and my military rank restored." Rosalind's father sank into his chair, pale with shock. "Rosalind, but she is not mad," Thomas finished. "Not even close. She is one of the bravest, most intelligent people I have ever known." "But the doctors," her father stammered, "the visions, the things she claimed to see." "Papa," Rosalind said softly, speaking clearly for the first time in his presence in 3 years. "I am different. I sense things others do not. But that is not madness. It is merely a different way of seeing." Mama understood. "I wish you could have as well." Her father stared at her as if seeing her truly for the first time. Guilt and shame warred in his expression. Sir Richard cleared his throat diplomatically. "Mr. Whitmore, I must inform you that the matter is not entirely resolved. There is to be a formal hearing before the King's Court. Captain Harding's testimony must be verified, and certain questions have been raised about how he remained hidden for so long." "I have already submitted a full account," Thomas said, his gaze steady on Rosalind's face. "Including the name of the woman who saved my life at great personal risk." "No," Rosalind whispered. "Thomas, you cannot. If it is known I harbored a fugitive—" "You harbored an innocent man wrongly accused," he interrupted gently. "And I will not allow you to hide any longer. I will not permit you to remain locked away, called mad, when you deserve to be celebrated." "The court is interested in hearing from Miss Whitmore," Sir Richard added. "Your testimony could be crucial in establishing the timeline of events and demonstrating Captain Harding's character." Rosalind looked at Thomas, understanding what he was asking, to step out of the shadows, to face not just a court, but society itself, to risk everything she had carefully built for protection. "I will testify," she said at last. Her father made a strangled sound. "Rosalind, you cannot. The scandal." "Let them speak," she said, strength flowing through her. "I am done hiding." The trial took place in the Great Hall of the King's Court, before a panel of military judges and assembled members of Parliament. The gallery was packed with spectators, drawn by the scandalous tale of a disgraced general and the madwoman who had sheltered a fugitive. Rosalind sat in the witness box, dressed in a simple but elegant gown that Thomas had insisted on providing. Her dark hair was pulled back, revealing her face clearly. Let them see her, she had decided. Let them see she was not mad. Lord Ashford's defence counsel, a sharp-faced man named Mr. Pemberton, approached her with barely concealed contempt. "Miss Whitmore, it is true, is it not, that you have been confined to your family's estate for the past 3 years due to mental instability?" "I have lived at Whitmore Manor for 3 years," Rosalind replied steadily. "Whether that was necessary is a matter of opinion. Do you deny that you have been diagnosed as mentally unwell by qualified physicians?" "I do not deny that physicians found me inconvenient," she said. "Whether that constitutes unwellness is another question." A ripple of surprise moved through the gallery. Mr. Pemberton frowned. "You jest, Miss Whitmore." "I do not jest, sir. I merely point out that what is labelled madness is often simply difference. I see and feel things others do not. That does not make me incompetent." Mr. Pemberton's expression hardened.
"Are you claiming to possess supernatural abilities, Miss Whitmore? Do you commune with spirits?"
"I claim to be observant," Rosalind replied calmly. "I notice what others overlook. I trust my instincts. If that is supernatural, then I fear you must arrest half the mothers in England, for they claim the same." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Mr. Pemberton's face flushed. "This is no laughing matter. You admitted to harboring a wanted fugitive, knowing he was being sought by military authorities. That is a crime. I helped an injured man who appeared at my gates during a storm," Rosalind corrected. "When I learned he was accused, I also learned he was innocent. I chose to help him prove that innocence, rather than see an unjust execution." "You took it upon yourself to determine his innocence," Mr. Pemberton said with scorn. "A woman declared mentally unfit." "No declaration has ever been made in law," Rosalind said sharply. "My father sought medical opinions, yes, but I was never legally confined, never formally declared incompetent. I was simply locked away because my presence was embarrassing." Her father, sitting in the gallery, closed his eyes. Thomas's defence counsel, a distinguished man named Lord Hartley, rose for cross-examination. "Miss Whitmore, Can you describe Captain Harding's condition when you found him? He was gravely injured, Rosalind said. Suffering from infected wounds and fever, he would have died without help. And during the weeks you cared for him, what did he tell you of his circumstances? Rosalind recounted the story carefully, the massacre Thomas had witnessed, his attempt to stop it, Lord Ashford's betrayal, and the systematic elimination of witnesses. The courtroom grew silent as she spoke, her clear voice carrying to every corner. And you believed him? Lord Hartley asked. I did. Why? Rosalind thought carefully about her answer. Because truth has a weight to it, a resonance. Those who have spent years being disbelieved learn to recognize it in others. Lord Hartley nodded. One final question, Miss Whitmore. Knowing the risk to yourself, would you make the same choice again? Without hesitation, she said firmly. Some things are worth any risk. Truth, justice, mercy. As she spoke, her eyes found Thomas's across the courtroom. He sat in the defendant's box, watching her with an expression of such pride and affection that her breath caught. The final witness of the day was Thomas himself. He stood tall in his military uniform, every inch the officer he had been born to be. His testimony was clear and unflinching, detailing the massacre and Lord Ashford's orders with precision that left no room for doubt. But it was when Lord Hartley asked him about Rosalind that the courtroom fell utterly silent. Captain Harding, you have stated that Miss Whitmore saved your life. Can you elaborate? Thomas's gaze moved to Rosalind, and when he spoke, his voice carried across the hushed room. Miss Rosalind Whitmore found me dying in the mud, a stranger who could have been anyone, anything. She did not know my name or my story. She knew only that I needed help, and despite being called mad by those who should have protected her, despite years of isolation and cruelty, she chose compassion. He paused, and Rosalind saw his hands trembling slightly. She nursed me through fever. She kept me hidden when soldiers searched her home. She risked everything, her safety, her reputation, her very freedom to protect a man she had no reason to trust. And in doing so, she showed me that honor and courage are not the property of soldiers or nobles. They belong to anyone with the strength to choose what is right over what is easy. The courtroom remained silent. Several women in the gallery had handkerchiefs to their eyes. Miss Whitmore is the sanest, bravest person I have ever known. Thomas continued, his voice rough with emotion. They call her the Madwoman of the Manor. I call her the woman who saved my life and my honor. The woman who deserves to be celebrated, not hidden away. He turned then to face the judges directly. My lords, if you find me innocent today, know that innocence was purchased with her courage. If you restore my honor, understand it was she who preserved it when all others would have let it die. Whatever verdict you reach regarding my fate, I beg you to remember this. Miss Rosalind Whitmore deserves justice too. She deserves to be seen for who she truly is. Not mad, not broken, but extraordinary. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, slowly, one person in the gallery began to clap, then another. Within moments, the entire courtroom was applauding, a thunder of sound that shook the ancient timbers. The chief judge banged his gavel for order, but even he looked moved. Captain Harding, Miss Whitmore, the court thanks you for your testimony. We will adjourn to consider our verdict. It took 3 hours. 3 hours during which Rosalind sat in a private chamber with Thomas, neither speaking, simply holding hands and waiting. Sir Richard came and went, bringing news that the judges were arguing, that opinions were divided, that the outcome remained uncertain. When the call came to return to the courtroom, Rosalind's legs felt unsteady. Thomas kept his hand at her elbow, supporting her. They took their places and waited as the judges filed in. The chief judge, Lord Weston was an elderly man with a face carved by years of difficult decisions. He looked at Thomas, then at Rosalind, then at the assembled crowd. "This court has heard evidence of grave crimes and great courage," he began. "We have examined testimony, reviewed documents, and considered the character of all involved. The charges against Captain Thomas Harding are dismissed with prejudice. Captain Harding acted with honor in attempting to prevent a war crime. He is not only innocent, but deserving of commendation." Relief flooded through Rosalind. Thomas closed his eyes briefly, his shoulders sagging. But Lord Weston was not finished. "Regarding Miss Rosalind Whitmore, this court has heard allegations that she harbored a fugitive. But this court has also heard testimony that demonstrates Captain Harding was no criminal. Miss Whitmore's actions, while unusual, were motivated by compassion and a pursuit of justice. Therefore, no charges will be brought against her." He paused, his stern expression softening slightly. "Furthermore, this court notes that Miss Whitmore has been grievously wronged by those who should have protected her. To be confined and labeled mad for the simple crime of being different is a travesty. While this court cannot undo the past 3 years, we can state formally and clearly that Miss Rosalind Whitmore is competent, courageous, and deserving of society's respect, not its scorn." Rosalind felt tears spring to her eyes. Across the courtroom, her father had his head in his hands. "Lord Ashford will face trial for his crimes," Lord Weston concluded. "Court is adjourned." The gavel fell. The courtroom erupted in noise and motion, but Rosalind heard none of it. Thomas had turned to her, his hands cupping her face gently. "You are free," he said softly, "truly free." "We both are," she whispered. And there, before the court and the assembly, before judges and lords and common folk alike, Thomas Harding kissed Rosalind Whitmore. Not with the desperate passion of stolen moments, but with the tenderness of a promise being made. The crowd cheered. Even the stern judges smiled. And Rosalind, who had spent 3 years being called mad, felt more sane than she ever had in her life. Spring came to England with unusual warmth that year. The gardens of Whitmore Manor, so long neglected, burst into bloom under the careful tending of new gardeners hired by Rosalind's father. He had much to atone for, and he was trying in his awkward way to make amends. Rosalind stood in those gardens now, breathing in the scent of roses and listening to bird song. She wore a gown of pale blue, her hair arranged simply, no more hiding, no more pretending to be less than she was. Wool gathering came a warm voice behind her. She turned to find Thomas approaching, looking handsome in civilian clothes. His military career had ended by his choice. He had served his country, but now he chose to serve truth in other ways. With Sir Richard's support, he had taken a position investigating corruption in military supply contracts, work that suited his conscience and his talents. "I was thinking," Rosalind said, taking his offered arm as they walked the garden paths together, "how strange life is. 6 months ago, I was the madwoman of the manor. Now I receive invitations to teas and gatherings. Society cannot decide whether to celebrate me or fear me." "Let them fear you," Thomas said with a slight smile. "You are formidable." "Am I?" she asked, glancing up at him. "I still see things others do not, feel things in places that others find empty. That has not changed." "Good," he said firmly. "I would not wish you to change. That gift of yours, that ability to see beyond surfaces, it saved my life. It may yet save others." It was true. Since the trial, 3 other wrongly accused soldiers had sought her help, drawn by stories of the woman who had seen truth where others saw only accusation. She had listened to their stories with the same instinct that had told her to trust Thomas. 2 she had helped clear. One she had discovered was genuinely guilty and turned away. "I have something to ask you," Thomas said, stopping beside a fountain where water danced in the sunlight. He seemed nervous, this man who had faced war and death without flinching. Rosalind's heart quickened. "Yes." He took her hands in his grey eyes serious. "I am not a duke or a lord. I am merely a man trying to do right in a complicated world. I have no grand estate to offer you, no title, but I have a heart that belongs entirely to you, and I would be honored, Rosalind Whitmore, if you would consent to be my wife." She had known this was coming, had hoped for it, dreamed of it, but hearing the words still left her breathless. "You would marry the mad woman?" "I would marry the woman who saved me," he corrected gently. "The woman who showed me that courage comes in many forms. The woman I love beyond reason or sense." "Then I am afraid," Rosalind said, her eyes bright with happy tears, "that you are the one who has gone mad. But yes, Thomas Harding, I will marry you." He kissed her then, soft and sweet beneath the spring sky, and Rosalind felt something settle in her chest, a rightness that she had never known. This was home. Not a place, but a person. Someone who saw her truly and loved her completely. The wedding took place in the small chapel at Whitmore Manor, the one with the crypt where Thomas had hidden. It seemed fitting, Rosalind thought, to marry in a place where death had been defied and new life found. The ceremony was small. Sir Richard attended, along with several of the soldiers Thomas had served with. Agatha Pelmore, Rosalind's old governess, travelled from Devon to stand as her witness, and her father, humbled and repentant, gave her away with tears in his eyes. When the vicar pronounced them husband and wife, when Thomas kissed her before God and witnesses, Rosalind felt the last chains of her past fall away. She was no longer the mad woman. She was simply Rosalind. And that was enough. They made their home in London, in a modest house near the Parliament buildings. Rosalind discovered she had a talent for investigation, for listening to the stories of those who were not heard. She became known as a woman to consult when truth seemed hidden, when justice seemed impossible. Some still whispered that she was strange, that there was something uncanny about her insights, but now those whispers carried respect rather than scorn. The madwoman of the manor had become the woman who saw what others could not. And in a world filled with lies and pretense, that was a rare gift indeed. Years later, when their children asked how their parents had met, Thomas and Rosalind would exchange glances and smile. "Your mother saved my life," Thomas would say. "Your father gave me mine," Rosalind would add. And both would be telling the truth. For sometimes salvation comes not from grand gestures or noble battles, but from simple courage, from choosing to see clearly when others choose blindness, from reaching out to help when it would be easier to turn away. They called her the madwoman of the manor. But she was never mad. She was simply brave enough to trust her truth in a world that feared it. And in the end, that truth set them both free. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear that being different is not the same as being broken. Leave a comment below telling us which moment moved you most. Was it when Rosalind first saved Thomas, when he defended her in court, or when they finally found their freedom together? Your thoughts help us create more stories of courage, love, and the strength to be true to yourself. Subscribe for more tales of hearts that refuse to be silenced, and stay until the very end for another unforgettable journey.